this. And I know certainly what both OpenAI and Anthropic now have that next layer where you can sort of rewrite the instructions. But what I am curious about is this leads to the last sort of story in this little segment before we wrap this up is that TechCrunch had an article on Google's AI overviews, which is fundamentally a slightly different version of this because it's sort of a baked in. You're not actually prompting, you're asking, doing a normal query, and it's trying to go and collect this. That it was struggling with Hindi, and what I'm curious about it is, like, if I look at the system prompt from Anthropic, is there anything in there that would help fix that? Or it's like the real issues that we seem to be having tend to not be at the system prompt level, either in the data set issue, like we were just talking about with having bad data that has bad stuff in it, or whatever is causing this Hindi one. And I don't know if anyone even knows why they're having issues. But I mean, if we look at all of this, I guess my question to you back is that visibility, is Anthropic exposing the system prompts, is that enough? Or is it just like window dressing to make me feel better?
Yeah, I wonder how much of this might simply be that perhaps Google system prompts are written in English and then being translated into Hindi. Anytime you've studied a foreign language, you know it can be difficult simply to get one concept into another. Some languages don't have conditional statements. Some confuse past, present, and future, or just don't have tenses. All sorts of things that we take for granted in English don't happen in other languages, and vice versa. And I think that is the real challenge that exists in AI. And the fact that Google's AI assistant was struggling with Hindi, first of all, that's a challenge because obviously we both have had plenty of Indian coworkers, and although they use English as a business language, they should also be able to use Bengali or Hindi or their native language that hundreds of millions of people speak to be able to access the questions that they're looking for or to be able to make consumer requests. So I I wonder to what extent a lot of this generative AI stuff needs to be rewritten in major languages. Of course, China
Well, I
has its
think,
own AI world, but for the rest of us, we are all kind of sharing an AI world right now, and it's all written starting in English.
yeah, I think that's an issue. I think it also it demonstrates one of the conundrums, I think, of generative AI specifically, and that is, for good or for bad. And if you remember the kind of history of OpenAI, this was almost like an experiment. That
Hmm.
nobody, including them, expected it to take off like it did. It was really this idea of creating this very simple exposure layer to what is an extremely complex technology. And I think it's part of the challenge is that, us as average consumers of users of the technology, and I put myself in that category as just a consumer of this technology, it it seems so simple. It's just this like little flashing cursor, and I type stuff in and magic happens. And it is so easy to truly underestimate the complexity of what's happening
Hmm.
behind the scenes, and all the way back around to how potentially easy it is for it to be wrong, still something that we forget, and to manipulate it. And I'm as guilty as anybody. I use this, as I mentioned, several times every single day. I have
Hmm.
three different ways that I access forms of AI, and I use it constantly. And I have to remind myself to go check things. I mean, I pretty much only use things that give me sources, at least if I'm not brainstorming, if I'm looking for information, and I go and I click through and I check those sources, at least peripherally, to make sure that it's not hallucinating. And